Yeah, hi everybody. Today we are going to talk about Cloudlock and a specific use case around CASB environments. So CASB being Cloud Access Security Brokerage. Cloud Access Security Brokerage has become more and more of an interesting topic in recent months, pretty much because the way that we need to investigate applications, behaviours and documents has changed. We are seeing less and less on the move, and we're seeing more and more at rest. We really need to have a look into what's going on within cloud providers. The move to the cloud has changed the way that we work. Move to people off of premise has negated the effective use of proxies and these sort of things. But what it also presents, cloud services present, are issues around the way that hackers can actually access unauthorized into your environment and into your cloud data. So there are three primary ways that hackers can do this. The first, finding improperly shared data. Now this is very difficult to be able to have a central point of control. Most customers that I speak with have a number of different cloud services, and whilst the information is available, it's not necessarily consolidated in one place to be able to see, here are all of the files that I have, and here's the breadth of share. The other thing that happens is where cloud identities and accounts get compromised, and this is quite often overlooked in terms of the most common now is around connected apps. So using something called OAuth, you can actually provide one of these third-party apps with all of your corporate credentials, accounts and accesses, unbeknownst to all of your security or your IT people. Very, very risky. You're essentially giving the hackers the keys to the kingdom without actually opening up your environment via malware, firewall ports, all these sort of things. So it's often neglected. We don't often know. And you can find the information within, say, Office 365 or Google G Suite, these sort of things, but it's buried down. So this is one of the things that a CASB service such as Cisco Cloudlock can provide you with, because we consolidate all of those API feeds to give you one particular portal. And we're going to show you that a little bit later. We've seen all sorts of attacks. There's email phishing. There was one with DocuSign as well, where users would receive an email with a link, and that link would take them to an app, and that app would say, hey, I would like you to authorize this particular application so that we can share data. And when you authorize that, it compromised your account. There were 1 million plus within 2 hours in the Google phishing attack. So OAuth, or Open Standard for Authorization, is a way that we can have, excuse me, the way that we can have an authorization service that we subscribe to, just like software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service. This is authorization as a service. So many of you out there would already be working with Azure AD or using Google credentials or these sort of things. Things like Okta. It's an easy way for an application to not have to have its own authorization stack and actually rely on the service provider. It's relatively cheap as well. So it makes it's a win-win, because you no longer have to roll out AAA infrastructure necessarily to be able to authorize all your new apps. You simply link your app's authorization into that particular provider. So you can see there it's a win-win for users, developers. Facebook have been doing this for a while. I've been seeing this on GitHub. You can use GitHub credentials now for OAuth as well. But it is a nightmare. It can be a weapon in the wrong hands. Now, users fundamentally are good people. Sometimes we as security people restrict accesses to certain things, or we don't necessarily have the tool sets within our IT suite for them to be able to do their job effectively or quickly. And so they look for other ways, look for other apps around the place, which has resulted in us having a shadow IT problem. And they'll share these apps with various people, they'll share these apps with their co-workers, and it's very, very easy for them to be able to use an OAuth type structure to authorize these new apps. Often we're in a rush. We all live that dream. And we'll simply go and authorize, yeah, we don't care about what the accesses are, we'll authorize that particular app. The amount of apps that are out there is quite fascinating. I mean, we're seeing it's grown to nearly half again in the early part of 2018, where we're up over the 350,000 apps around the world now. We're seeing millions and millions. These are actually enterprise apps. We're seeing millions and millions of games apps around, but we're looking at 352 billion in 2021 of total downloads, which is quite phenomenal. If you think about what happened with the telephone reached 100 million users in something like 70 years. Pokemon Go reached 100 million users in a month. The risk levels are rising, not so much in terms of what might be happening within an Apple iTunes store, because their vetting process is very, very good, but the connections that are actually used to those apps and from those apps, but also the infrastructure that's supporting the application. So with DocuSign, for example, while the DocuSign apps and websites have been provided access through various OAuth channels, the infrastructure behind that is not necessarily meeting, or at one point wasn't necessarily meeting certain standards, which resulted in a breach where there were users' emails were leaked out, which was used in a broad-based phishing campaign as well. Now, if you can imagine if the hackers had been more successful in that case and they'd actually been able to get corporate credentials. So what the attacks look like, and this happened with Google Docs, is where the attacker created a spoofed OAuth app listing on Google in the App Store there, on Google Play. The recipient clicked the open docs from the phishing email from a known contact. This is classic social engineering. Then what happened is there was a spoofed app which was authorized with the corporate credentials. And if we look at what the Google Docs app wanted to do, it wanted to manage your contacts, read, send, delete, and manage your email as well. And then what happened? Permissions were actually granted, and then the user is attacked to the back end. So Google provisions a temporary access token, appends it to a redirect, and the attacker gains access to the OAuth token once the user is redirected. So once this actually occurs, the attacker has complete privileges. Complete privileges into whatever OAuth service that user actually provided credentials for, to act effectively on their behalf. Now, I'm going to come back to the aftermath. I'm just going to go into some of the interesting things that we can do around Cloudlock. Because we operate at the API level, we go straight in as a super user, a super admin if you like, and we provide a view of a number of different things. Those things are user behaviors, where people are logging in from. We look at the behavioral risks around those sort of things. We have a look at the detected events across various platforms as well, location-based risks, login failure risks, and so you can see that we can consolidate across these multiple platforms and provide all of this eventing in one place. You can see here we've got an account compromise with Okta. You can see that right here. But what I wanted to go into today was things around application risk. So these are third-party applications that a user has authorized using their corporate credentials. You will see that when you authorize an app. Do you want to use GitHub, Facebook, Google, Office 365? So here in this screen, I can see the top risky apps. This one called Kaizena, we've applied a critical risk level to this particular app, and I'm going to show you why that is. Now, these are not in this particular window actually coming from any sort of proxy or any sort of data on the move. This is coming from events from the corporate sanctioned account where your credentials are, from the OAuth provider themselves with the API events. So if we look here across the top left-hand side of this particular window, we can see a classify button which comes up. I can highlight that. I'm going to go into that in a second. We can see a risk score applied. If we mouse over that, we can see that it's a number of different things, our own CyberLab reports, access scope risks, and app category. And we have a community trust rating. So all of our Cloudlock community, this is a percentage of how many of those are actually authorizing this particular app. We can see detections, we can see an application ID, and we can see that this is actually installed by 3 users right here. Here are the users, and you can also see that I've been able to revoke access a number of times, but then there have been users who have reauthorized that access. So let's talk about how we revoke access. Because when a user installs an OAuth or allows OAuth to work, it's actually a token that's created via an API, so it's an API token that the app can leverage to be able to go back to that OAuth environment. No matter if you change your passwords or delete the app or whatever, that happens programmatically. That token is set. You need to go back into the OAuth provider and revoke that particular authorization. So what we can do then is, because we have access at the API layer through Cloudlock, I can simply say, okay, revoke. I can revoke for all users, or I can specifically identify certain users, and they might be within the Microsoft environment, that might be within, say, a Google environment, for example, and I can have exceptions if I want, and I'm going to notify them as well. So I can revoke the app, but I've done that before. I've revoked that access authorization for all domain users. And there's been these people, and you can see who is actually has it installed, even though I've revoked it. The users will keep trying. So I really want to block this, because you can see here that the app says, when you allow me to authorize as you are agreeing to give me full data access into your environment. Keys to the kingdom, right there. If Kazina is ever hacked, effectively you've got a trusted third party, so-called trusted third party, that gives a path for attackers. So, we have this other classify button here, and this shows you the integration that we have with our DNS layer. So I can ban, and I can also block access for all users to Kazina at kazina.com. So what this does is it builds a domain list for all of the domains, subdomains that Kazina requires to operate. And then we push that to our DNS protection layer, to Cisco Umbrella. And then where that list is applied in policy, and that can be on-premise, it can be roaming users, it can be tied into, say, Meraki. All of these places will have that denied, will have that level of access actually denied, so users will not be able to go in and reauthorize. Even users who download that app and place it on a managed iOS device, because of the Cisco security connector, same a policy applies. The very, very simple, very clear, and very focused use case. Just go back to the aftermath of this particular attack and why you should consider this approach. It's often overlooked. You can see that nearly 1% of employees got infected, of over 300,000, over a quarter of 1 million corporations. Now, changing passwords won't address. Enabling multi-factor authentication won't mitigate the risk. And OAuth is not Google only. We're looking at things like Okta, looking at One Login, looking at Ping, also Azure AD, any one of these providers. Now GitHub as well that I've noticed. So anywhere you're allowing to provide your OAuth provision, they are at risk, and you really need to monitor all of those. So we have a number of tenants within our cloud security services. So first of all, Cloudlock, the one that I've just mentioned to you. Then we have Umbrella, and these link in together on the back end as I demonstrated. Via API, we can identify risky apps, and we can push those to the DNS block lists, and that secures absolutely everyone, and we're revoking at the same time. But then in the first order, we've also got ESA, the email security appliance, and the cloud email security. So this is the front line. Web and email are still the most prolific sources of attacks. They are the primary vectors. All of these need to be considered. But the ESA and the CES email security platforms can address a number of different attempts at phishing, can address spam issues, grey mail issues, social engineering. It assists with all of that. Woo. So Umbrella is your first line. It goes over absolutely everything. You've probably seen this a number of times. We learn about where attacks are potentially coming from. We can see, we can provide you with the visibility, and this is a great first port of call. You can get the visibility, see where all of the cloud apps are coming from, and then determine, what do I want to do with this? What sort of apps am I going to allow or disallow, or find out further information about, so that I can make good security decisions? Then Cloudlock as another part, working at an application, user data and apps, infrastructure as a service, together with our observable acquisition, which is now Stealthwatch Cloud, and platform as a service, providing a cloud access security brokerage service. Very, very easy to turn on, very, very easy to be able to generate historic reports right from the word go, and completely out of band. So there is no risk to the business in turning this on and getting better visibility. So in the case of the attack, where Joe had invited someone to open a document, if the victim was redirected to the attacker's domain, Umbrella would have blocked that redirect, because we can predict various things, and I'm sure you've seen various demonstrations about that. But if the attack is successful, Cloudlock revokes the OAuth token, then Umbrella Investigate helps the researchers to actually go and find out more about that infrastructure and maybe provide more blocks or better reporting. I'll leave it there for now. I hope you enjoyed this short session, and it's been great talking to you all, with 36 seconds remaining on the clock, and I'm getting thumbs up from the control room, so thank you very much.